What would you do if you were charged of a crime that you didn't commit? That happened to our next guest, Gina Dodson. And it also happened to a woman that she's going to talk about way back in the 17th century. The past isn't silent, it's buried. Welcome to Hidden Heroines of History. I'm your host, Gayvin Powers, a published author, award-winning screenwriter, and storyteller who brings women's history to life. Gina Dodson is a writer, actor, film producer, and the mother of 2 grown children. She is also a survivor of domestic violence and a felon as a result of a false accusation by her accuser. Unable to vote, pursue certain career paths, or even chaperone her children's field trips, Gina advocates for change by sharing her experience. She has published articles about her arrest and living without civil rights and has appeared on numerous PSAs, podcasts, and interviews. In 2004, she was named Focus on Women magazine's Woman of Impact and received the Courageous Activist Award from the Maryland General Assembly. In 2025, Access Pictures released a 2-part documentary about her escape from abuse and the battle with the justice system. Because of her strong belief that women need support from other women, she co-founded BAB on 3 Productions, a female-driven production that encourages underrepresented people in filmmaking. She says her message is simple: people need people. And there is always hope that we can make things better. Let's go ahead and welcome Gina. Welcome, Gina. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're going to talk today about Margaret Mattson, and I'd love to know what's common knowledge, because I've never heard about Margaret Mattson before until you recommended her. And now that you've told me a little bit about her, I am so fascinated. So please tell me what you knew in terms of common knowledge, and we'll get into what you found out a little bit later.
Okay, well, I love that because I don't know what is common knowledge because I'm a Midwestern girl. And so I had an audition for The Witch of Ridley Creek.
Okay.
And it was for the title character and Margaret Mattson, and I knew nothing about her, so I thought I was going to look her up so I could get more into the character. And it turns out that Margaret Mattson was actually a decade before the Salem witch trials that we all know about. She was tried. She was the first witch trial in Pennsylvania. In a nutshell, she was a Swedish-Finnish immigrant. So there were a lot of Swedes that came over to Pennsylvania during that time. Particularly, this was Delaware County-ish. And so they come over and they're most Christian Lutheran descent, but also they have these forest Finn traditions, which has more of a pagan-esque air about it. So they have the herbal remedies and the nature-rooted ceremonies and so forth. So we have this strange combination going on, which coming to a new country may look a little different to the English settlers that came over to the same area several decades later. And the Swedes were already on their land and already working and had villages established. So when the English come over, and it's Quakers in this area, right, led by William Penn, they come across this unusual culture. But I guess it was a Quaker thing to be kind of tolerant and overlook it. They weren't hurting anybody. But Margaret and her husband Nils ran a bathhouse, which is interesting and also societal norm for the Finnish Swedes. But of course, the English would have found that to be kind of unsettling, all the naked people and whatnot hanging out together. But again, they tolerated it. There was a couple of winters of really bad frost, and it really did the land in. And suddenly, this really nice worked land along the water where the Swedes had settled started looking pretty dang good.
A land grab.
Yeah.
Never heard of that ever happening before throughout history. What are you talking about, Gina?
I know.
Yeah. So it sounds like she was on some prime land, and like what happened with a lot of women in the witch trials, whether it was the Salem witch trials or other witch trials that happened throughout the world, people were charged for witchcraft because land was wanted, their husbands were wanted. Ever that someone else was jealous of that they had that someone else wanted, many times they were charged with being a witch. And I do actually have an ancestor her name was Lydia Gilbert, and she was charged of witchcraft, and she was hanged because someone wanted their land. And I mean, she had 15 children. She was in her 50s, and someone probably with more power wanted the land that she was on with her and her husband, and that was it. So they were done.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I mean, you mentioned husband. Why is it the woman? But
Right.
they were the vulnerable one. Women during this time,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying only during this time, they often became the scapegoats
Mhm.
for whatever was going on, like for their husband, because the women were unfortunately more vulnerable to these
Oh,
things.
absolutely. Gina, you're actually bringing up a really good point because I did some research on Jacquetta of Luxembourg, who ended up being the mother of the Queen Elizabeth before Queen Elizabeth I. She was married to Edward of York. This is um, pre-Henry VIII. It was during the War of the Roses, and it ended the war when the Yorks and the Lancasters came together. So they married together. So Jacquetta was mother of Queen Elizabeth, and she was the Countess Rivers, and she was charged for witchcraft twice. The first time was her husband died, and then the second time was after she died, the crown wanted to take their land that they had amassed all this wealth when her daughter and her children were in power. So they were trying to take all the land back. So, yes, this is very common what you're talking about. And it's not just someone was flying on a broom or was creating spells or what have you. It was very much a political move. And you're right, women were the vulnerable ones. And that's why they came after the women because the women didn't have the protection that the men did. And so, even the queen's mother, many women in power had been charged of witchcraft. And so just because you were in power didn't mean that you escaped other people coming after you.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
I like that you brought up the flying on a broom because
Yes.
just to jump into her trial, obviously there was no solid evidence. It was all hearsay, right?
Uh-huh.
So one person said she didn't speak English, or at least not
Mhm.
much. So William Penn was overseeing the trial and he made sure that she had a translator. How good the translator was, I really don't know. But yeah, so she had a translator. And like one witness said that they'd heard 20 years earlier that she had bewitched a neighbor's cow when the cow wouldn't give milk. And then somebody else said someone had a vision of her, or at least some old lady, standing at the foot of a bed with a knife. And someone else allegedly said that she was making strange incantations while stirring a giant cauldron. Where I come from, we call that stew. But so William Penn must have been a very interesting guy because, and this also could be folklore. I don't really
Mhm.
know, but allegedly he asked Margaret if she flew on a broom or on a broomstick, and either she was really scared, which I couldn't blame her, or the translation was bad, but she said she did. So William Penn said, "Well, there's no real law against flying on a broom."
Yet. There's no law yet.
And at this time, so she was lucky that she was not part of the decade later Salem witch trials because those were under
Mhm.
Puritan rule, whereas where she is under the Quaker rule. So the legal system is not as harsh and it's more lenient and looking to help people improve their lives, not to
Mhm.
burn them at the stake or whatever.
Right.
No, it wasn't a capital crime to be
Mhm.
a witch if you were proven guilty. It was, a civil and a reputational kind of matter. So, she was found guilty, but not of
Wow.
being a witch. She was found guilty of having a reputation of a witch, and she
My goodness. Seriously?
Yeah.
Like,
So
anyone could make up a reputation about someone else. Could you imagine if everyone went to prison for having a reputation of something that someone made up about them? I mean,
yes, I
no
can.
one would be left to walk the streets.
You were so right. So she was fined and turned over to the custody of her husband.
Wow. Well, thank goodness it was the custody of her husband and not someone else.
Well, that's
But
true.
still, the custody of her husband, like, he's gonna keep her in line? Like, why do this in the first place? You had mentioned about why you thought they were doing this, and I think you had mentioned about making an example of them, because seriously, like, you paid a fine and then she gets turned over to the custody of her husband, like, what was I mean, I'm glad that she wasn't hanged or burned at the stake or anything else or dunked or drowned, but it seems like that's a power struggle there.
Yeah. Um, so definitely the making the example, because let me back up to the whole land thing. So there was like, they were told to either submit to English rule
Mhm.
or risk losing their land or their social standing or their reputation.
Mm.
I'm sure Nils was like right on her side, but let's focus on Margaret. And she's like, no, this is our land. We fought hard for it. And just to back up more on Margaret, they did fight hard for their land and worked hard there. But also when she was around 20, Dutch ships came
Mm.
and they imprisoned her husband on board the ship while they plundered their village and killed all the livestock. Records show that Margaret was stripped, most likely assaulted, and so they had hard lives. And obviously, she's going to have some fear and not want to be under the
Mhm.
thumb of other people coming in like this.
Mhm.
She held on to their customs, obviously, was talking of the herbal remedies and the healing. She was a healer,
Mhm.
and, they held on to their language.
Mhm.
She said, "This is me, and this is our land, and this isn't right." And she did say that in court. Well, not in those words, I summarized, but here she is, this woman in court, obviously a jury of all English-speaking men. Well, I think there was one Swede there. But, she said, "Give me some solid evidence. Give me some real evidence. This is all hearsay, and this isn't right."
Mhm. And I keep going back to, "Give me some solid evidence, give me something other than hearsay," and then that's what they charged her for, was based on hearsay.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's not even legal, and I do wanna touch on that because we're gonna come back to that later on, because that is something I wanna tie in with your story as well. But just going back to Margaret for just a second before we move on, why do you think that she was considered dangerous at this time period?
I would say so she was dangerous because I hate to use the word foreign because they lived there, they were settlers. But by their accounts, she was foreign. She didn't accept the social traditions and the culture of the English. So that made her dangerous already. She hung on to her roots, trying to comfort in them, especially with what she'd been through already. And she was a strong woman. So if I'm going to make an example of somebody, I, this is going to sound terrible, but so a boyfriend I used to have, his theory was if you want to protect yourself, you walk in and you pick a fight with the biggest, baddest person in the room and you
Wow.
take them down. And then that way,
Mhm.
all the others fall as well.
Mhm.
So if you oppress the strong ones, the weaker ones are going to follow.
Mm.
And honestly, fear and prejudice, we see it, unfortunately, we see it all the time, translating into hate and oppression of people that are not understood and accepted,
Mhm.
conform or die.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's really, really unfortunate. And then you also touch upon a little bit about the fact that she was a healer. She hung on to her traditions. She had the herbal remedies. Is there anything else you know about, say, with her intuition, her faith, that might have been different, say, from the English settlers that gave her strength?
I'm not sure how strong the pagan rituals were, but was also a big part of their culture.
Mhm.
But I guess I would say it was reminiscent of Native Americans.
Mhm.
It was a blend of, Christianity that embraced nature, for
Mhm.
lack of a better fitting word.
Mhm. I did also read that there was a local Native American tribe too, and they had similar practices, but they had the sweat lodge. They
Sweat
would
lot,
do the
that's
sweat
it,
lodge,
yeah.
yes, and then they would do animal noises that would call in their spirit animals and things like that. So you had that going on also, as
That's
well in the
yes.
area.
Yes, and supposedly the Finnish Swedes enjoyed more getting super hot and then going and rolling in the snow. It was
Yes.
invigorating.
Yes, yes, which the English found odd, but it's really good for circulation, so
Yeah.
that was very smart. So hundreds of years later, it's funny how we see that differently than they did back then,
Wonder what they would have thought of our polar plunge. Something I don't do,
right?
but I will still applaud.
Yeah, I'm not doing that, but well done for all of you that do. Yes. So anything else you'd like to add about Margaret before we go ahead and talk about how this ties in with you?
I admire as a woman the strength that she insisted on firsthand evidence, which 10 years later in Salem was hearsay was acceptable to prove guilt. So were visions. It kind of goes backwards. She was a little ahead of her time. 10 years later, there were 20 executions, 150 imprisoned. And even, I believe there was even a child that was accused of being a witch. And the trials there, they accepted secondhand accounts and set a precedent for spectral evidence at that time. So they were even able to use dreams as proof of somebody's guilt. So that happening later on just tells us a little bit more about how difficult it must have been for Margaret, not only not speaking the language or understanding the culture, but sitting in front of these, trying to prove she's a good person. I'm not even that she deserves everything that she has fought for decades for.
Yeah. And I think you, of all people, can relate with that because you had that very similar experience, especially with hearsay evidence. Would you like to go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about your experience and what happened with you? I mean, it shocks me when I heard your story and I read some of your pages. It just shocks me. We're talking about Margaret from the 1600s, which blows our mind that this would happen in the 1600s. Hearsay is condemning a person. It's the late 1990s when this happened to you. So please go ahead and tell us about it because this completely just floors my mind. And to put it into perspective, this is just before Y2K when the world was going to melt, not so far away when we're going to party like it's 1999 and Purple Rain is happening. Take it away, Gina.
Sure. In 1998, after years of abuse, I escaped. Very difficult with a plan. And only my son, I escaped years of abuse. And my boyfriend found me and he said if I didn't come back home, he was going to ruin my life. And in my mind, what could he possibly do to me, right? A few days later, a SWAT team surrounded my house and arrested me and charged me with murder. He had called the police and he said that a miscarriage that I'd had in college, which was 5 years earlier, and 3 years before I had met him, he said it was not a miscarriage and that I'd had a live birth and killed it. And so I was charged with murder based on his story. I was in jail for many months, battling, financially drained. All of my family, my brother went bankrupt. I had a $3 million bail. So I stayed in jail for the majority of the time because of that. And even the prosecution said they were making an example of me. He said he likened me to a preacher's daughter. They called me a black widow. The newspaper before trial, they called me the murdering mommy. So everybody was out to get me in jail because you don't want to be in jail being a baby killer.
Uh-uh.
Well, in the end, after being drained in so many ways and risking losing my son, because while I'm in jail, my boyfriend pursues full custody. The judge, well, didn't have any evidence, and they offered me a plea bargain. And what it was is that if I pled guilty to a lesser felony, which was concealment of a homicide, they said I would get 6 months jail time and 2 years probation, and I could go back home to Virginia and raise my son. And my family did not want me to take that. Even my lawyers didn't want me to take it. But honestly, it was the only guarantee that I had. And I no longer trusted the judicial system. I did not trust the law. Look what they had already done to me. Look what I'd been. The guards were telling me I was never going to see the light of day. And so I did
Mhm.
take that deal and I did raise my children. And I don't regret that I made those choices. I do regret that I was victimized into being forced to make that choice. I should not have had to make that choice. I did not speak of that. I raised my children without going to that dark place because I did not want that to affect them. I mean, it was my choice to take the plea bargain. And so I've been quiet until they reached adulthood. And now I do speak about it because I think it is something that we need to learn from and we need to grow awareness about.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think it's really what you went through is horrific. Let's just say that the legal system let you down like it had, even putting you there in the first place. What would have happened to you if it didn't go your way?
I was t- I was told. Now I was young, so most of everything I know of, of the legal side was just what I was being told. But 20 years to life were mentioned to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so taking the plea deal meant that the time that you'd already served could be done. So you had been
Yes.
in prison for how long waiting just to get this plea deal?
I had a $3 million bond, so I
Mhm.
couldn't get out like a lot of people can before trial. It took 3 months to get my bond reduced. I think it was reduced to 20,000. So I did get out on my family put up the money for that. And then it took 3 more months waiting to go to trial and continuances. It's more financially and emotionally draining stuff,
Mhm.
harassment by regular people and the media. And then two couple days before Christmas, they offered that deal, and I took it.
Oh, and it was right before Christmas.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, who doesn't wanna go home at Christmas time? Also, you had to survive being in a prison. It's just not where you regularly hung out.
Right.
So, you had to learn all the ropes of prison and how to survive prison life as well.
Yeah, that was definitely difficult. And I learned a lot about humanity behind bars and a
Mhm,
lot about myself. I also learned that we need each other. I did bond with others. I fought with others
mhm,
too, sure. But it did bond.
mhm.
I mean, a lot of the bonding was out of our common uncertainties and our common, the pain, the socially acceptable pain that unfortunately a lot of women are groomed into. I hate to say it that way, but it's unfortunately true. We're
It's
raised
true.
to take on this burden and to be quiet and to live simple, sometimes lives, taking care of others and ignoring what we need or what is safe for us.
So, did anything ever happen to your ex-boyfriend or any repercussions for him?
Well, I never filed charges against him because I wanted my battle to end and I did not want to give
Mhm,
him any more of myself.
mhm,
I saw him in court for the custody battle. He
mhm,
was told by the judge as long as I was free, he would never give my baby to him. Judge
mm,
saw through a lot of it. He claimed in court that he did not abuse me, that I actually abused him. And his sister testified against him in court. And I know that helped me an awful lot. But unfortunately, after that, he sent Child Protective Services after his sister, claiming that she was abusing her children.
oh my
So
goodness.
he had a record of making false accusations before what he did to me and also after. Life has not been kind to him. I think karma takes care of itself.
It does. I really do believe that. Absolutely. Is there anything else you would like to share today before we wrap up about your harrowing journey or Margaret Mattson's harrowing journey?
I think Margaret and my story, I think they bring truth to the fact that we are so strong and we're so resilient. And if we support one another and listen to one another, there's really nothing we can't do.
I agree. We have to take care of each other, especially as women. We really do have to
Yes,
take care of each other. It's
I
so
agree.
important. We're going to go ahead and toast to Margaret Mattson. And I wanted to ask you if there was anyone special that you wanted to toast to during your journey, any people that have helped you along the way that you'd like to toast to as well. Anyone you want to add to this?
I would. I would love to add my mother. And she's in heaven, but I hope she knows I understand the things she said back then.
Yeah. Oh, here's to your mom and all the other moms that are looking out over their babies and taking care of them and doing what they have to do and doing the hard stuff. And here's to you, Gina, for surviving and finding a way to thrive despite all of that. So here's to you. I can't wait for your book to come out. You'll come back on when your book comes out. I just have to tell the audience I got to read parts of it and I completely shut down. Like I just felt like I was transported when I read it. So it's very powerful and I'm really proud of you. And here's to you as well. So have a great day and thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. I appreciate you so much. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye everyone. Thank you for joining us on Hidden Heroines of History. If you enjoyed this, like, share, and subscribe. We have more amazing episodes planned. You can listen to them on the Hidden Heroines of History podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and iHeartRadio.